let's hope this actually works. Been having trouble with the internet connection for some unknown reason. Yes, I mean, yeah, heck, I'm even filming in this room instead of the other room. Even though I think the audio quality is worse in this room than the other room. But enough of that. I am DN Maolo, and today we shall be continuing my series where I react to videos from my What's Later playlist. And today we are going to be reacting to a video by a YouTuber that I'm actually subscribed to by the name of Daniel Green. The video titled Classic vs. Modern Fantasy. Right. Hopefully, this will actually work. I'm tired of seeing the same opening skit here and after going past it.
I've upgraded my greens.
It's sad. When I first saw it, it's funny. Now I've seen it so many times, it's no longer funny. Don't hate it when technology fails. I hate it when technology fails. Oops. I hate it when making Easter kind of funny.
Screen set up. Yes, we can now see my feetsies because people kept asking me why they were cut off. Because my green screen didn't cover them. But now it does. And I've also gotten rid of my torso. I've decided it is unnecessary to have a body to talk about fantasy. Or at least this part of it. This doesn't need to be here. I don't know, I just want to be weird, so we're being weird now. Let's go ahead and jump to the topic of the video, shall we? In this video...
Okay, right, we finally made it past the point where, the video kept failing, the internet failing, I think, failing, right? Right, let's finally watch this gosh darn video. Alright, remember to like and subscribe and check out the original video, and check out Daniel Green if you would, like this video that I'm reacting to and all that, and also check out my videos, okay, if you want to see me to react to some other stuff. Okay, check out my YouTube channel, okay, and just, right, okay, let's do this.
Video, we're going to be covering classic versus modern fantasy. And I'm sorry to disappoint the people who are thinking this is going to be some kind of like duking it out. Oh, which is better video, because that's not what I'm going for at all. Another video.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't expect that. Before a more intellectual discussion. Okay, what the heck am I doing here? What am I doing?
Video for another day. But what this video is actually about is how the term classic fantasy is used in comparison to modern fantasy, and how wibbly wobbly, mashy washy, confusing, and just downright overgeneralized that can be at times. So first of all, let's figure out the context in which people use the term classic fantasy and which of those three definitions I will be directly addressing here in this video. First, there's the one I'm going to talk about the least, and I find to be the most just straightforward. Like, there doesn't need to be much clarification here, and that is that it's classic in the sense that it was very important for the genre. These are your obvious examples. Well, one, if we're looking for the modern times, A Song of Ice and Fire will be massively influential as the decades go on. I don't think that'll be a controversial opinion, and it is going to be an icon of the fantasy genre. Whether people are embracing it or trying to steer away from it has yet to be seen, but A Song of Ice and Fire, even if it's just in the conversation of adapting fantasy, is going to be considered a classic. We go further back, and then you have things like His Dark Materials, Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia. They're classics in the sense that they are icons of what the genre can bring to the table. That's not what this is focusing on either. Then there's the second definition, which we'll touch on a little bit, and that is the relevance of the story. Is it modern in the sense that it's here and it's something we're all still discussing, or is it classic more in the it's in the days of past, it maybe had its influence, but we're not talking about it with what's going on right now. We're going to touch on that a bit because I find that to be the most connected to the third definition and the one we're going to discuss most closely. And that is the classic style of fantasy versus the modern style.
Yeah. That's kind of what I thought the video was going to be, before I even clicked on it. Back when I, added it to the What's Later playlist. All those years ago. At least it felt like years. In reality, this video was made 4 years ago. And yet it seems so long ago, those 4 years. Strange. Sometimes, you know, 4 years ago, it doesn't seem that long at all. And other times, those 4 years seem closer to a decade than 4 years. It's strange how time does stuff. Okay, enough spit talk.
Style of fantasy, which is the biggest gray, wibbly wobbly, mashy washy thing on the planet, in my opinion. There are a lot of comments like these ones on my channel, which are saying, oh yeah, there are elements of this guy's story that feel classic to me. And that's a very clear reference to a style of writing. So let's go ahead and talk about the current differences between the modern style of fantasy and the quote unquote classic. Notice I said current difference, because the first point I really want to drive home here is that this is something that is constantly evolving and changing. If you and I were to jump in a time machine and hop back to 1970 and find one of our fellow fantasy nerds, pin him down, shake him real close and say, "What's modern fantasy versus classic?" He would urinate.
He would, give different answer than what someone today would give. Obviously, I mean, 70 years ago. I mean, that's like 50 years ago. At this point, have a century of difference there. Yep, people, were born, grew up, and had kids in that time, and maybe died. People have lived their entire lives in that 50-year period. Short lives, but lives nonetheless. But also, what he's about to say, they will probably urinate, just from the surprise of it all.
Urinate probably, and then tell us some of the differences between the fantasy being written in 1970 and that which is written in like the 1940s and 30s. But if we come back to modern times and look at fantasy in the 1970s, we largely just lump that in stylistically.
Yeah, basically what I said.
With the fantasy being written in the 30s, 20s, 10s, in 1890, can we go back that far? I mean, there's fantasy written all over the place. And here's where I would like to bring in my Twitter poll I recently put out. Yes, I manipulated you and lied into giving me data for a video. I'm an evil man and you shouldn't trust me. But if you see here, I asked, where do you find the line between classic and modern? And what we have is...
honestly, I said kind of depends, like, on some in some ways, the 80s, kind of the start of modern fantasy, but on the other hand, the 90s could also be considered the start of modern fantasy. It kind of blends it. Although, honestly, I think I'm leaning more towards 90s and all that. Since the 1980s, still had a bit of a classic feel. I mean, it was different. I think it was slightly different feel, but on the one hand, it was the feel of the 80s. So it is kind of similar enough to like the 1970s.
Is a bell curve. And I guess this is the time to bring up that yes, there is a fourth definition of classic fantasy where there's some definitive year or time where the classic ends and then the next one begins. And that's the worst definition of fantasy to me, because as you can see here, it's something that evolves and slowly changes. There's going to be people who make the case.
Because, in the 80s, there's some fantasy and stuff that's similar to stuff that was, made in the 90s and 2000s, which I would, find as modern. Well, on the other hand, there are some, things that are, a bit more, 70s and 60s and all that. But, the 60s fantasy is, would probably have a bit, doesn't exactly, have a lot of in common with 80s, but it also has the same amount of commonality with the 1940s and all that. Uh, at least I would assume. Yeah, yeah. Because then again, it also kind of depends on the work. I mean, it's somewhat of a case by case basis. I mean, one thing for certain is that at the very least, fantasy that's between children, and that has largely stayed the same for the most part. I mean, the way fantasy is written for children, that has not changed as much. But if anything, I think it has changed more in the last like 10 years than it has between the 19 to to the 1980s and all that. So yeah, yeah. Okay, look. This is a reaction video. Okay, I mean, yeah, I got you. Add something to here. Okay, even if it's just rambling on, because like, what do you want me to do? Just stare at the screen blankly while you're watching this video? I mean, what would I be adding to it then, huh? What would I be adding to it? Ugh. Yeah, whatever. Nobody watches these videos anyway.
That all the way back in the 70s or 80s, we started seeing the seedlings of what became popular in the modern genre of now. So maybe that's where we should say the definitive line is. Or no, it didn't fully reach its final form until 2010. I'm sure if Twitter let me put 2020 on this poll, please.
Bullshit. Modern fantasy was modern fantasy when I was a kid, okay? Harry Potter, that's modern fantasy. Percy Jackson and the 11 Pins, modern fantasy, okay? If it was made after I was born, it's modern. If it was made before I was born, that's debatable. But honestly, I think if it was made before the 1990s, it was not modern. Not that. Okay, basically, if you want to fantasy to be classic, it has to be older than all of my older siblings. Okay, it has to be older than all of my sisters. Okay, and my older sister was born in the 90s. My oldest sister, yeah, she was born in the 1990s. So yeah, you gotta be older than in order to be considered not modern. I mean, when it gets actually, I kind of wouldn't consider a lot of 1980s would be classic. But I also wouldn't consider the 1980s to be modern either. I guess the 1980s, it's in that weird middle point. At least at this point in time, the 1980s, a weird middle point. That I don't know. Anyway, I was born in the 2000s, early 2000s. So yeah. It was written, after my birthday. Then yeah, it's definitely modern. Okay, you're not gonna try to convince me something that was written in like 2005 is classic. If it was written in 2005, that is not classic. That is modern. You lying, douche person. Yeah. Wait, well, I probably should have just said douchebag since, like, douche is the offensive part, isn't it? Like, yeah. Douchebag is the offensive part, and now, who cares what insults are? Good or nice.
Give me more than 4 options. It's ridiculous that you limit me to that. But anyway, if I was able to put 2010 on there, we would see this bell curve complete, and people would say, no, it started right now, brand new. And I think that all of you have a point and are kind of right or wrong. So let's just agree that this is something that'll constantly be moving forward as time does, and there's no definitive hard date for classic and modern. And let's go back to talking about the stylistic evolution, which is what this video is going to be focusing on. But
I was trying to look at these, I wonder what the thumbnail for this video is gonna look like, because, you know, in case you didn't notice, I don't actually, you know, make the thumbnails, and YouTube just, kind of makes thumbnails, and then I just, automatically, you know, generates, you know, 3 options, and I try to pick the best option, all that. It's, probably why, you know, a lot of the thumbnails are kind of, trash. But, you know, out of all the trash that was given to me, it was the best trash I could get.
But don't you worry, my fans of bell curves. We're going to be talking about bell curves within bell curves soon, so just buckle down. Okay. So when the conversation of the style of classic fantasy shows up, inevitably, hopefully, I love these people, the hardcore fantasy nerds show up, and will bring up all kinds of authors who were well ahead of their time, and maybe their style, even though they were writing in an era which is pretty definitively talked about as classic fantasy, will hold up to modern trends. Now, not universally, almost no one, in fact, I would say there is no fantasy author who was writing in the 80s is going to read exactly like someone being written now. There's just too much change. But certain elements of their writing damn well can. I've recently started reading Guy Gavriel Kay, and I find his writing to, yes, be in the style of what I would say is classic fantasy largely, but he was vastly ahead of his time, as it's become abundantly clear even one book in, for what was standard in terms of character work and theming of his stories. Robert Jordan is another author who, yes, I'm very, very well versed in, and I can say that his character
Nice picture. This is a nice picture. I like this picture. Very nice painting. But don't you think this is a nice painting? I think it's a nice painting. No, I kind of hope that this ends up being the thumbnail. Or something that's so soon or just as good looking as this comes a thumbnail. You know what I mean?
Character work was decades ahead of his time when he first started publishing The Wheel of Time in the 1990s. It's still up to par with what's being written now, with his care to tackle things like mental illness, the stresses, and the mental breakage someone could go through with the journey the characters are on. But to contradict that, I find the beats of his story, especially early on in The Wheel of Time, to harken back much more similarly to the classic fashion of fantasy story beats. I think that's somewhat related to his original ambition, which was to write The Lord of the Rings in a more modern context, so inevitably his story elements were glued to that formula at first, and then as these styles changed and the 90s transitioned into the 2000s, he broke away from that further and further. And then we get this great little experiment where you have a definite modern fantasy author, Brandon Sanderson, coming in and finishing off the series. And that gives us a very clear example of how it did just kind of naturally bleed into the modern genre. I think that's what
No one these days really should read The Wheel of Time. I haven't read The Wheel of Time. I barely know anything about the series at all. I really should read it. Yeah. Yeah, but I should just read more books in general, you know? That sounds nice. That sounds like good, a nice thing to do. Yeah. I should do that.
That's why so many people refer to The Wheel of Time, even outside of the hardcore fan base, as a wonderful bridge between classic and modern fantasy. There are, of course, authors who are the opposite of this, who upon releasing a fantasy book, it's already dated. Nothing in their writing really pushes the bar. Maybe it even just feels like it's all in an older style. But do not discount these people. Just because something's not at the cutting edge of the trends doesn't mean it's not worth your time or a valid, neat, worth discussion fantasy story. And I just want to take a moment to hit that note here in this video, because I feel like it can come off like I'm saying you have to stay on the cutting edge at all times. That's what's so important. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, that is not important. You know, what's important is writing a good story. Okay, and don't worry about transmitting. What are you, a Hollywood producer? Hollywood producers are stupid. They're all, you know, stupid, thoughtless idiots. All of them. And don't think like a person who works at Hollywood Okay, okay, you're right. A true writer does not think like a Hollywood writer. Okay, writers in Hollywood are the dumbest people you will ever meet. And some of the dumbest, most brain dead, people are the people who write for Hollywood. Okay, yeah, that means say Hollywood doesn't know anything. Hollywood is stupid. Hollywood is the dumbest place on earth. Absolute idiots. All of them. All of them are, well, not all of them. I mean, yeah, there are quite a few writers in Hollywood who are quite brilliant, quite smart, and even a couple geniuses there. But for the most part, and all of them are just absolutely just dumb, absolutely dumb, and idiotic, completely idiotic across the board, and all of that.
At all. I'm just trying to clinically examine how these things push forward and how we should talk about them when referring to classic as a style. So this question just became even harder to answer because we don't just have the bell curve of the style of modern fantasy's rise and classic's kind of eventual downfall, which again,
Yeah. I mean, because if we're going with style, style is whatever the individual writer wants it to be, and that does not always, follow, the most popular trends. That in other words, some often as a bell curve, eventually, becomes less a bell curve and a series of waves that keep on peaking and dipping over time, and and in somewhat unpredictable ways too. I mean, like you can see a bell curve at a distance. The more you get closer, the more ragged and ununiform the bell curve is. The more just less of a bell curve the bell curve is. Yeah, basically exceptions within exceptions that are all or make up a general pattern, a general arc through history, and all that. And even where that arc of history is going is not determined. Like honestly, like in politics, think people think of a great moral arc of history as if said is destined to go towards some enlightened destiny where eventually we'll be able to create perfect society. But that's not true. Okay, and it's like the United States was not destined to exist. The modern rights we have was not destined to happen. Okay, instead, that was, decided and caused by, the wills of a multitude of many, there are thousands of small wheels and a few big wheels that manipulated the smaller wheels into doing the bigger wheels doing and all that. And you could even argue that there is a supreme will that even guides that, but the supreme will allows the smaller wheels to do whatever they will and all that. Hmm. But moving
I mean, we
on.
still have people writing in a classic fashion, and we have people back in the day who are writing in a more modern. But we have bell curves within bell curves once you break down authors. One element of their writing can fall back here, and another over here. And once we measure it all, we're just, oh my God, things are so confusing. I mean, every author, once you break them down like this, is going to be a
Nice map. I really like this map. Is this from the Gorilla Time? Quite nice. As you can definitely, see the token influence here. But that's not bad. I do like token very much. Yes, very nice map. I like this map.
bit scattered. No one's writing just uniformly falls into one specific era of this is the way fantasy is written and we stringently follow it. It's just not how human beings work. Our influences evolve and grow and come from different eras.
Yes, and that's why Hollywood, bad movies, because Hollywood don't understand how people think or work. Uh, of course, sometimes they do. Yeah, after all, and it just, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna get into my poorly organized thoughts on Hollywood, since it would just turn into mad raving rant of just randomness instead of a well thought out argument and all that. Mm-hmm. And just if you would look at the random thoughts bubbling within one's head at any given time, you would you'll be destined to find a lot of just pure madness and nonsense within the heads and all that. For indeed, the sometimes the version of ourselves we show the world is that which is most polished, even in the most smallest and insignificant of interactions. That which we show ourselves is nothing more than a more polished version of what we wished to be shown. Hiding the inner chaos and turmoil and messiness and the contradictory nature of our own minds and soul. I'm talking way too much. Okay, yeah. Like even for a reaction video, I'm just talking way too much. I'm just talking absolute nonsense here. Why am I, just spending so much time just talking nonsense? Do I just like the sound of my own voice? I mean, well, no, I just like talking. I just like talking. And honestly, I don't think I've had a lot of opportunities to just talk loud, talk my own thoughts. Honestly, kind of want to do 8 hours now, but alas, I can't. But the goal of this is for me to react to a video that he has made, and therefore, for me to just hijack this and just use it to spout whatever random thoughts pass through my head. I did not assume without end and without cease would be unfair, but with him, you who are watching this video, and on some level to myself as well. Look me, you're talking too much. Oh my god, I really need to stop.
Eras. We're not just all diehard looking at Tolkien going, I'm gonna follow you, man! So when answering this question of what is the classic fantasy style of writing, you more or less need to look to the Doctor, who put it best.
More like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah. The reference to the beginning of this video, yeah, we saw it.
It's all wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, mushy gray, because there's no hard lines of this is how a character was written in 1955.
Yeah, isn't that basically, Doctor Who kind of right there, just big, wobbly mess of nonsense, the Doctor Who, canon and all that. It's gotta be kind of hard to, keep things straight with all the time travel that goes on with Doctor Who. This time travel in every episode, that, and also, whatever. This is a video about Doctor Who. I'm barely an expert, but Doctor Who. I'm far from an expert Doctor Who. Let's actually just continue this video. Oh my god, we're not gonna actually, finish the video with radio going. Am I just lonely?
Because not every author in 1955 was writing characters the same way. And you can't even expand that generally and say there's like 5 to 10 year chunks of how characters were written, because there can just be a 5-year period where everything is propelled forward stylistically within the genre way more aggressively than it was for the past 50. I would say we're in one of those times right now where suddenly the self-publishing boom has drastically changed the landscape of fantasy in a more aggressive way than we have seen in decades. So Daniel, damn it, tell me the solution here. If you're saying that we can't just say something's in the classic style because there's no definitive hard lines, then how can I say something is reading like it was written in decades past? Well, you can. I'm not saying you can't. I never hear him trying to say you can never say, oh, this reads classically to me. But try to have a slightly more nuanced approach would be the best case, in my opinion at least. Try to say specifically what is reading to you more like it was written back in that older style with the flowery prose and the less focus on flawed protagonists at the front and center, which is what we're seeing now. Yeah, I will go ahead and make the statement that prose aren't what they used to be consistently. We still have authors writing with prose that are just, I would say
by Gabriel K.
Neil Gaiman and Rothfuss are all modern in the terms of they're still putting out content fantasy writers whose prose are as flowery and luscious and poetic as ever. So again, proving that this is all, it's all a cloud, man. So I guess my
I should do some, I should definitely learn how to write prose and all that. Yeah, improve my writing a bit. As you know, when it comes to, my writing, it's definitely, synergy of different styles, pushed through me and my unique perspective and style and thoughts and all that. I know there was way better than slap you to get out of AI, that's another reason that, dislike Hollywood is, just big corporate, fools and all that, trying to, take away artists' jobs and replacing them with AI, and why I hate AI. It's not because, the accusation of AI stealing, the people's art, no, why I really hate AI art is because, it's not true art, okay? For something to be true art, it needs to have some soul into it, some actual some thought and effort, okay? I mean, what makes, good art isn't just how it looks, but also the effort that's been into it, the time and energy, and the practicing, the honing of one's skills into that. And honestly, if you just crank out AI art like that, and you are not a true artist. You will never be a true artist unless you actually pick up drawing potential, or whatever you tend to use, and actually do it yourself. You can do it. Okay, it's gonna be hard at first. You may think that you just don't got the natural talent. Well, guess what? My art is garbage, and that does not stop me from making more art. And also, my art has gotten better. My artwork has gotten better. It has gotten better than what has been in the past. And also, you can also, learn how to draw. I mean, people aren't just born with the ability to just, draw or write, like Mozart or Shakespeare, famous artists, Leonardo da Vinci. People aren't born great. Right, they slowly attain the level of greatness over time. Now, part of that is, what some would call luck or destiny or just God's grace, and all that. But huge bunch of it is one's own individual will and inner strength of character, the desire, the determination to do better and all that. And therefore, if you're an AI artist, become a true artist. Stop, wasting away, cranking out, meaningless junk after meaningless junk, and that's try to, do better. Or just cut off your hands and gouge out your eyes, so that we will never have to, deal with your insufferable, laziness and self-importance ever again. Know that. Just so you don't make any more this terrible garbage AI art. I mean, honestly, AI art is nothing more than a novelty. You know, and it's just a fun little freak show. AI art is. Why am I rambling about AI art on video titled Classic vs. Modern Fantasy? Am I even paying attention to this video? I'm just rambling whatever comes across my mind. Truly, what is worse? To talk too much? Or to say too little?
Final answer to the
Definitely in one of those moods at the moment. That thinking. A contemplative mood. I'm in a contemplative mood at the moment, yes.
The question of what is classic versus modern fantasy comes down to nuance. Try to be as specific as possible, and if there's something that does seem to be ahead of its time, even if it's just written in the 40s and reads like it's in the 70s, maybe point it out, because I'm seeing more and more people say it's in the classic fashion, and what they mean is it reads like something before 1980. But there's no real tact there. There's a lot of difference between something that was written in the 70s and something that was written in the 30s. That's a huge gap of time where fantasy did change quite a bit. Acknowledge the ever-shifting bell curve, and note that people from different eras would consider what they were reading at the time the golden modern standard, highly evolved. Every generation of fantasy authors stands on the shoulders
Lava lamp. That's what it is, you know. Wondering what the background is. It's a lava lamp. That's the background too.
of the last to propel what we're reading further and further. If YouTube allowed me more characters in titling this video, it wouldn't be classic versus modern fantasy. It would be the breakdown of how classic fantasy is too blanket of a term, and instead
Well, in all fairness, if you title your video that, nobody would, check it out because, honestly, that's a real long title. I mean, heck, even old history books from the 19th century don't have titles that long. That's a ridiculously long title. Nobody would ever, honestly, that's a stupid title right there. I came up with this stupid title, classic with a modern Spanish. So it's very oversimplified. It's incredibly simplified, but it's a lot better than say wall of text. It's known for having tried to be a wall of text. I mean, go give me heck, those Japanese light novels that often get on into anime, television series, animated television series. They're typically in the type of genre known as isekai and all that. Yeah, I mean, none of them are as long as the title, behind him here. Yeah, the breakdown of how classic fantasy is a blatant case that it's in the way. I'll just let me say it.
we need to acknowledge the fact that this genre deserves the fantasy is too blanket of a term, and instead we need to acknowledge the fact that this genre deserves the academic approach of looking at each decade individually and seeing how they slowly bled into the next, leading up to what is the current state of quote-unquote modern. Trends
Well, that's just culture. That's just culture and society. Anyway.
rise and fall, and they can even rise again. I think maybe in the next decade or so, we might see prose become super important to what is considered good fantasy once again. It's just a suspicion, but I'm leaning towards that again becoming something that's really important to be considered a good fantasy writer.
Yeah, honestly, I think I would like to get some very good prose. That seems very nice, writing prose. I really should learn how to, write really good prose and all that. Yeah. And speaking of which, at the current episode of my webcomic that I'm working on, get that, yes, I should have it out before Lent ends. Hopefully, I'll get it out before March. Again, tease on that. Yes, I know I'm taking way too long to get done. Should have been done like a week ago. I know that. God. Why do I waste time? Why must I waste so much time? What the heck is this? Reaction video, a therapy session. What am I doing?
And if that's the case, these people who are just saying blanketly this reads like classic fantasy will suddenly be wrong, because modern fantasy will once again have these flowery, longer descriptions, and if that's the case, what was classic is now modern. Now, as always, I'm very interested in keeping this discussion going. It's difficult for me to do that because YouTube is limited in how much I can respond to you. There's 100 people making 50 different points, and I can't go through and leave the paragraphs for each I would need. But let me know where you think I got this wrong and right in the comments down below. Do you prefer it just being a blanket term of, yeah, it just reads like it's older and there's no real nuance between what's older and something that's much older? Or no, you appreciate the idea that there are trends that rise and fall. Certain authors can't be just pinned down as this is a classic fantasy author, and we need to take the approach of, well, this guy had his world building on a scale that feels Tolkien-esque, but the way his characters evolved was definitely more similar to the modern trend of having these flawed people with mental issues, and they're not just morally in the right, they're more gray necessarily, because that's the conversation I much rather have, because I'm a big old lame nerd who spends way too much time thinking about these things.
Yeah, honest, I think I lean towards the latter than the former. The former seems a bit too much of an oversimplification.
Anyway, guys, like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the
Yes, do the same with me as right now. A webcomic Patreon. Is the original video that I will have linked in description down below. Subscribe to me, leave a like. Also, when you subscribe, try to ring the bell so that way you get notified for all my videos when they come out. And leave a comment. I would like to get more comments. I believe I got a comment on one of my videos a few days ago. It was very good and it was nice, It wasn't much, but I actually got a comment on one of my videos. That's great. That's big, real big. I like it. I like that. It's nice.
Patreon if you want to support what I do here. I mean, I think I earned a like because I showed you my full feet. They're not cut off anymore. That took a little bit of effort, so like button. Or is it on that side? I don't know. Anyway, have a good one, y'all. Peace.
I like that video. Yes, in many ways you could argue that the Lord of the Rings is the first modern fantasy hero. easily aroused with dislike. Don't know why that would be arousing. Oh, wait a minute, I just realized I forgot to actually read these comments out loud, like I usually do. Look at the time, that's why. I'm tired. And that's probably why I've been talking so much. Just tired. That's fine. Okay, yeah, I better just stop the video now. Nothing interesting is happening anymore. So, goodbye.